Hello everybody, hope you're doing well and thanks for joining us for another video. Now, probably one of the most well-known flat earthers is Dave Weiss, aka Flat Earth Dave, and he seems to regularly appear on channels that really have absolutely nothing to do with flat earth, where he'll make a presentation about supposed flat earth evidence and then plug sales for his flat earth app. And recently he did this on comedian Jim Brewer's channel. He spent about an hour presenting his evidence for flat earth and then 20 minutes pushing for people to go and pay $3 for his app. Now, I was originally intending on addressing his presentation first and then talking about his app at the end of the video. However, some quite alarming information has come to light about his app in the past few days, so I'd like to address that first and then cover his presentation. Because he advertises his app always as a source of flat earth research. It has a sun-moon clock, links to videos that Dave has deemed as great resources of information about how flat earth works, and it has a flat earth friend finder section that will show you where other app users are in the world, and it can let you find people near you within any given radius. Or if you sign up to, I think it's an $11 per year subscription, you can access a bunch of other social features. Now, I was going to wait till the end to poke some fun at his app because some people have seemingly been looking over the app's source code and found it actually uses globe geometry. For example, apparently the friend finder section will take users' latitude and longitude coordinates, and then it allows you to select the radius of how far away you want to be able to find other app users. But to do this, the app uses the Haversine formula to work out which users are within a particular radius. And for anyone unaware, the Haversine formula is how you calculate distances between locations across the surface of a sphere. So the only way his app can offer any accurate distances between users whilst employing the Haversine formula is if the Earth is a globe. And within his code, part of it about the sun and the moon, there is also the use of a value called obliquity, and it's given a value of 0.40927. Now, there is a couple of meanings to the word obliquity. Often it's used in orbital mechanics as a word to mean the axial tilt of a celestial object, i.e. a planet. And strangely, if you take this value that Dave's app gives for obliquity and take it as radians and then convert it into degrees, you get the exact value for the Earth's axial tilt. Ironically, though, the word obliquity can also be used to mean being deceptive and deceiving people. However, Dave goes on about how the app opens up information that would otherwise be kept hidden from you.
It does all sorts of stuff to bring people together and basically get the information that's hidden from you. If you're unsure, just look at it in the App Store, read the reviews.
And it's now come to light that that is actually much closer to the truth than I'd originally thought, because fellow debunker MC Toon recently published a video highlighting a quite alarming issue that Dave's app seemingly has absolutely no security to it. But I'll let Toon explain the details himself.
Dave's Flat Earth Clock app has been an absolute mess. The vulnerabilities in it are severe, and Dave has been doing some aggressive cover-up. Almost 3 years ago, Dave was informed that the app was insecure. He should have known that already. He didn't, probably. I don't know. But he did know at least when somebody told him, Mr. 42 and some others perhaps told him in December of 21. And he changed a little bit of the URL so you couldn't find something. And that was it. He did basically nothing, but he knew it was insecure. So for almost 3 years, he chose not to fix it. A little bit ago, somebody contacted me and said that they found that the app was completely insecure. There's no security at all on anything. So without even doing any hacking, you all you need to do is know a special URL, which was in the source code of the app, which everybody can have on their phone. With that, you can start to view people's private information, including their email address, their password, and the location on the globe. I did a video on that. Dave started blaming people instead of himself. It kind of escalated. He's been doing an active cover-up, claiming that it's been fixed every day. He fixed yesterday's stuff every day, but actually he's never fixed anything, really. The passwords are still 10 days later. You can get them. It's not that difficult. If anybody has any experience analyzing source code, they can just go get it. And all of these things are illegal for him to store because in the Google Play Store description, he says that he does not store any information. And this type of thing is illegal because in the EU, the GDPR rules say that if you say you're not storing information, you can't store information or you're breaking the law. So pretty serious fines can be levied on him. He's been reported. If you want to report, then you can come to my Discord server. I'm sure Dave will drop a link to my Discord server in the description. There is a channel called globesec-public. Come on into there and ask for some help in filing a report to the appropriate agency in your country for the data breach that he has. It's very severe, and by all accounts, looks like he's not trying to fix the problem.
Thanks, Toon, and Toon will be helping me out throughout this video covering a couple of other topics as well. It does seem somewhat ironic that Dave often talks about how the government has all your information and how they track what you're doing and they're constantly watching you, only to seemingly have people pay him for the privilege of having their information exposed. But my biggest issue with this personally isn't that the flaws existed in the first place, it's Dave's response to it that's bothered me. He does not seem to be taking it particularly seriously.
So we did have a data leak. Some hacker got into one of our APIs and was able to extract everyone's data, the data that they're already sharing with every other user.
You did told that it also shared the password?
It shared. So the password is supposed to be a unique password for the app, right? So you just put a random password in there. Now, some people may be stupid enough to use their email password, their banking password, who the hell knows if they use the same password everywhere else. That's a problem. So we changed it and we informed everybody, hey, if you do use, which is probably a fraction of 1% of the people might have done that, to just go and change it. Data leaks happen everywhere.
He was even at one point trying to blame Toon for telling everyone about the problem existing.
Right? What's amazing? This hacker did it and then wanted to send us the information, but for some reason he couldn't find my email properly. And he wanted to tell us so we can fix it. So he gave it to an anti-flat earth troll who did a live stream and showed everybody how to find the data, right?
And despite knowing that there is now major leaks, he's kept the app online throughout. I mean, flaws in system coding happen all the time, and trying to find them and plug them all is not exactly easy. I mean, I've even recently been taking some programming classes on Brilliant.org, who, incidentally, are sponsoring this video. Their programming courses, much like all their other courses, start off basic and build up gradually through the classes. They explain the concepts and they quiz you on them with problem-solving questions. Now, I personally love the interactive aspect of their classes because I find visualizing how things work makes it easier for me to understand it. I'm currently on some of their programming classes about how to simplify programs, and the animations give me a better idea of where and why something within the code isn't working. But if you're not interested in programming, they have hundreds of other courses across subjects like science, data handling, and maths. Regular viewers of this channel know how much I love using Brilliant. At the time of recording, my daily streak of using it is now up to 574 days. Try it for yourself with a 30-day free trial using my link brilliant.org/Dave McKeegan, and using that link will also entitle you to 20% off their annual subscription. Now, let's get into Dave's presentation, because there is a slight problem with his flat Earth evidence. It's all wrong. And frankly, some of it is quite misleading to anyone who isn't already familiar with the arguments. For example, he spends a portion of time on the topic of Antarctica. He claims that it's the outer limit of the known Earth, but that there could be more lands beyond it, but we can't know because apparently we can't go beyond 60 degrees south latitude, and the governments have made going there seem so unappealing that nobody now wants to go.
right? If you had a bathtub but didn't have the side of a tub, the water's gone. You didn't have the side of a pond, of a lake, the water's gone. If you didn't have the side of the world oceans, the water's gone. It's not on a ball spinning in a space vacuum, which is a whole nother problem. This is just the shoreline of our land. And, and nobody wants to go to the South Pole or the North Pole because we're all programmed with National Geographic shows showing the guys going to the North Pole, freezing their butts off. They're running out of food. They're eating their dogs, right? Then they get there and it's dark and cold and there's nothing there. That is to program you. So you never say, I want to go to the North. I think there's lots of interesting stuff in the North and more interesting stuff in the South.
And he also claims that nobody's ever traveled from Chile to Australia via the South Pole because you can't do that on a flat Earth.
You can fly from Chile to the South Pole. It only takes about, I think, 4.5 hours.
Yeah, that's actually not true. But no one's ever gone from Chile to the South Pole and then to Australia. They always double back because on a flat Earth, it doesn't work. No one's ever gone here and ended up over here. No one's ever done that.
Which is odd, because I did a video back in July about how Antarctic expeditions don't make sense on a flat Earth. The key one being the 1958 Trans-Antarctic expedition, when Sir Edmund Hillary and Vivian Fuchs both led teams as part of the Commonwealth Trans-Antarctic expedition. This expedition consisted of two teams, one led by Fuchs, which sailed from the UK to Antarctica, setting up camp at Varsel Bay, which is south of South Georgia. And around the same time, New Zealand explorer Sir Edmund Hillary set out with a team from Wellington, New Zealand, landing at McMurdo Sound, which is the same place that Scott's team landed half a century earlier. So Fuchs's team would set off from the Antarctic coast near South America. Hillary's team would set off from the coast near Australia, both setting off around November 1957, and both reached the South Pole around 2 months later in mid-January 1958. Fuchs's team then continued along the route back that Hillary had taken, arriving at McMurdo Sound on March 2nd, 1958. And I'll be honest, I'm surprised that Dave is making those claims about not wanting to go and not being able to go, since he's been saying that for years, and also that there isn't a 24-hour sun in Antarctica because that doesn't work on a flat Earth.
One of the arguments that people give is on a flat Earth, you can't have a 24-hour sun, a midnight sun in Antarctica. And I totally agree.
But recently, he was given a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for an all-expenses-paid trip to Antarctica, and he turned it down. Quite aggressively. Now, this trip is being dubbed the final experiment, where Will Duffy is paying for himself, two flat earthers and a glober to go to Antarctica this December to see and document if there is actually a 24-hour sun like the globe predicts. I've been very fortunate to have been offered the spot for the globe side, which I've eagerly accepted. But this is a public trip organised by an external company, Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions. So anyone can come along with us as well, but they'd have to fund their own way. Now, a few people on the globe side are planning on joining us. One in particular happens to be MC Toon, who is currently crowdfunding to be able to go. So it's odd that Dave would claim nobody wants to go to Antarctica and that we're not allowed to go there, since I'll be going there in a few weeks, entirely of my own will. Dave had the opportunity to go, but has turned it down, and Toon, I'm presuming you actually want to go there as well.
I want to go.
Even funnier that Dave says you can't go to Antarctica because his Flat Earth Friend Finder app regularly shows users in Antarctica. And MC Toon actually is currently crowdfunding to get the money necessary for his trip to Antarctica. He has a GoFundMe page set up, which I will leave a link to down below. I encourage anyone who would like to support him, please do go and do that. Whatever you can spare, I'm sure he would very much appreciate it. Anyway, let's dive into the rest of Dave's presentation. The conversation kicks off with Jim actually asking him how we sometimes see the top of the moon lit at sunrise, and he puts it down to reflections off of the firmament.
The sun was rising.
Okay.
But the moon was still up.
Yeah.
And the angle where the moon was, and I see this a lot. Like, why is that part of the moon
Right.
lit.
The top part is lit,
Like,
and the sun's over
it doesn't-
here. The sun's over here, and then
Correct.
it's lit up here.
Yes.
Right.
How is the crescent part lit up
That happens
but
one
the
week every month.
sun's
Every month, you'll see
down
that.
here? So
Yeah.
if I take a spotlight and I shine it in this direction, the whole thing, I should be able to see the whole circle. How is the bottom dark and we just see the top? Which then I started looking at the firmament or whatever you call it, like.
Now, for starters, if the top of the moon were being lit by reflections off of the firmament, then the top of the moon should always be lit. In reality, the observations that we see are easy to explain with a globe. If it is sunrise at your location, then you are standing along the terminator line and the sun is in the east near the horizon. If the moon happens to be in the west above the horizon, that means it's not in a perfectly straight line between you and the sun. It's essentially swung out slightly. This means you're viewing the moon from a slight angle relative to the sun. But Dave agrees with Jim that it's reflections off of the firmament and claims that's why rainbows are curved and that you never get curved rainbows indoors.
And maybe I'm getting too far ahead, is the rainbows. Someone said to me, why do you never see a rainbow that's flat? Ever.
Well,
why?
Not outside, but
rainbow-
inside. If you have a mirror, it'll create a flat rainbow. But the rainbow is the firmament. Makes
Always curved.
Yeah.
Well, here is a demonstration that somebody made in their garage, able to reproduce curved rainbows indoors. So either the firmament is inside this person's garage or Dave's claim is just wrong. But then he quickly changes topic to bring up the UN map, and Jim asks why they use it.
Why does the UN use it? Why does the World Meteorological Organization, another controlling entity, use it? Why does the International Civil Aviation Organization use it? And then it's the flat Earth map. So if you look at all of these, hey, that's good, but that's not good.
Now, I've actually already done an in-depth video on this topic, which I'll link down below, but the short answer is that the UN and its branches like the World Health Organization represent pretty much all the countries in the world, and their logo is trying to reflect that. But just showing a globe will only allow some of the countries to be visible, whereas a flattened map allows all of the countries to be displayed equally. The UN and its subsequent logo were formed in 1945. Its branches like the World Health Organization were formed from scratch after that, and because they're based in the UN's head office, they share the same basic logo. But one of the branches of the UN is the International Court of Justice. They're not based in the UN head office, they're based in the Netherlands. Their logo is two hemispheres of a globe side by side, and the ICJ was not formed from scratch by the UN. The ICJ joined the UN in 1945, but it was originally the Permanent Court of International Justice and was established back in 1920 and using the same two hemispheres of a globe as their logo. So globes as logos predates flat Earths being used. But this brings us to Dave's next point, which is how could globes be used as logos in the 1920s when people didn't go to space to see the globe until the 1960s?
Why does the world controlling organizations have a flat Earth map, but the movies, which are programming you, are showing a globe? 1927, Universal Pictures came out with the spinning globe as their logo, and no one had been to space to see what the Earth was until 1972 when the first photo was taken, and it happens to match perfectly.
Now, for starters, Dave's meme here is completely false because that is not the blue marble from 1972. This is the 1972 blue marble taken during the Apollo 17 mission. And what made that photo notable was that it was the first photo of an entirely lit hemisphere of Earth taken from a distance. But at that point, thousands of photos of Earth had actually been taken in the years prior. The blue marble shown in Dave's meme is actually the blue marble from 1997, which was created from multiple cameras on board a GOES geostationary satellite. But to address Dave's argument of how did Universal manage to have a globe as a logo 40 years before people went to space, it's not complicated. By the 1920s, the Earth had been mapped out. Every continent was known about, their shapes, sizes, and respective distances from each other were all pretty well known, and the size of the globe itself had been worked out way back by the ancient Greeks. So if you know the map of the world and you know the size and shape of the world, then it's pretty straightforward to wrap that map around that shape. It's how the Chinese emperor had a globe created back in 1623. But if we're going with Dave's logic about how did Universal have a globe map before people went to space, then how does he have a flat Earth map when apparently nobody's been high enough to see the whole flat Earth? Now, he does gish gallop a bit through this presentation, jumping back and forth between talking about space and talking about how things work on flat Earth. So I'm going to group them together to make it easier, and I'll start with space. For example, he brings up essentially talking about the inverse square law of light, trying to argue that stars shouldn't be visible at the distances that science say they are.
I mean, our sun, if it was right next to us, it would fill the entire sky. Move it 93 million miles away, it's the size of a nickel held at arm's length, right? Just like we see it. Double that distance, it's the size of a pencil eraser. Double it again, it's like the size of a large star. Double it again, it's now 8 times as far away. It's like a tiny star. At a light hour, it would be a star. At 24 hours, you couldn't see it. So a light day away, you couldn't see it. And we can see stars that are hundreds of light years away.
Except that's not really how the inverse square law works. I have done a video breaking this down because moon landing deniers use this all the time as well. But the short of it is angular sizes of light sources decrease, so the amount of light landing on a given area of Earth will reduce, hence why nighttime is dark, because not much light from the stars actually reaches Earth. But for a simple demonstration, here I have a light panel that I set up, and I set up a camera about 2 feet from it. I put the light on low power, and I put the camera settings such that it made the light appear very dim. And then I took a photo before moving the camera back to 8 feet away from the light, which is 4 times the distance. So, according to some people's notion of the inverse square law, the light should now appear 16 times dimmer. And yet, with the same camera settings, the light has exactly the same exposure, it just looks a lot smaller. But at any distance, some light will make it to Earth. The question becomes if it is enough to be visible to us over the ambient light around us, and whether our vision is sensitive enough to make that out. I mean, the human eye can see a tiny candle flame in the pitch black 1.5 miles away. If you look out of an aeroplane window at night, you can see lights way off in the distance. Those are bulbs, street lights and car lights, etc., but we can still make them out. And when you look up at the night sky, your eyes can only actually make out the brighter stars anyway. If you use a camera that can be more sensitive to light and can form an image over several seconds or even minutes, you see there are far more stars in the sky than your eyes can perceive. And he points out the pretty common flat Earth claim that the stars don't change, therefore the Earth can't be moving.
Remember that I was showing you the spinning spiraling galaxy, right? We're traveling.
Yes.
All of the stars are doing their own orbits. So they say 80% of the stars in our galaxy are binary, which means they're orbiting each other as they're orbiting the galaxy. So basically, it's like I threw a rock at a beehive and all these bees are going everywhere. But in all of history, never have 2 stars changed positions due to motion. You know how things change positions? You know, parallax. Right?
Right.
When you move, things change positions, right? Things closer, you move faster. Things farther away, move slower. They say, but no 2 stars have ever changed positions, ever.
Except he has 2 problems. Firstly is that the stars do move. He points out it's parallax. Objects closer to you will appear to move more than objects further away. But let's take a look at stellarium. Now, this gives us very accurate information about the exact positions of objects in the sky at any time you want. Stargazers and astrophotographers and the likes regularly use this kind of software to decide what objects do they want to view and when is the best time to view them. And the 2 closest stars to Earth outside of our solar system are Alpha Centauri and Barnard's star. And if we look at both of those in stellarium, we can see that year on year, their positions clearly move relative to the stars around them. And there have even been examples showing this, with people photographing them a year apart and showing they are actually moving. The second problem with Dave's claim seems to be a common issue for flat earthers, that they don't appreciate the scale that we're dealing with. Now, I have covered this problem a bit more in depth in this video, but for example, Alpha Centauri is 4.2 light years from Earth. If we were to say that Alpha Centauri wasn't moving in space, not actually possible, but hypothetically go with it for a second, at the speed that the Earth moves through the galaxy, if we were to scale it down so that the Earth were the width of a human hair, the solar system moves 26 meters each year. That's 1/4 of a regular football pitch. At that scale, Alpha Centauri is 900 miles away. For context, that is the distance from Wembley Stadium in London to Rome. So, walking the length of the pitch at Wembley Stadium would be the equivalent of 4 years of travelling through space. How much you saw the Colosseum appear to move would be what we would expect from the closest star to us. But the stars aren't really static in space. Pretty much all the stars that we can see are within the Milky Way galaxy and are all spiraling around together in the same general direction, like cars going around a roundabout. Then, to round off space, he manages to throw out 4 quite ridiculous topics in about 3 minutes, straight one after the other, almost like they don't want people to think about the topics for too long. The first one he puts out is claims about the people who founded NASA. I'm going to let Toon cover this one.
There's a lot of funky stuff going on.
Who
here.
are the founders of NASA? We got Ronald Hubbard, right? Ron Hubbard, founder of Scientology. Walt Disney, a cartoon producer. Werner von Braun, a actual Nazi. Okay. Jack Parsons, right? And an occultist and Aleister Crowley, the most wicked man in the world. These are the founders of NASA.
Are you serious? I don't think anyone knows this. The
Everyone
founders?
knows this. Not everyone. A lot of people know this.
The reason why nobody knows this is because it's not true at all. NASA was founded in 1958 by Congress writing a bill and President Eisenhower signing it into law. At that point, it had been founded. The first administrators were not any of the people on his list there. They were Keith Glennon and Hugh Dryden. But what about the people on the list that Dave just claimed were the founders of NASA? Well, L. Ron Hubbard founded the Church of Scientology, a very strange cult. Go watch the South Park episode if you want to laugh. Now, he founded that in 1954, so by 1958, he was very busy with his new cult. He had no involvement with NASA. What about Walt Disney? Well, Walt Disney had no involvement with NASA either. He did do a film with Werner von Braun in 1955 on how rockets work and stuff like that. This was not involving NASA at all. NASA didn't exist at the time, but they did do something together. Now, what about Werner von Braun? Well, yes, he was, in fact, during World War II a Nazi. He did get brought over to the United States, and in 1945, he became a devout Christian, and he was a Christian for the rest of his life. He recanted all of his positions from World War II and completely changed his life over. It's a pretty great story if you want to have a look at that, right? Anyway, what about Werner von Braun? Well, yes, he did in fact work for NASA starting in 1960. He had nothing to do with the founding of it. He was working elsewhere at the time. Once again, not true. Now, what about, I'll jump to Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley was quite a horrible person. I have no interest in anything that he had to do, but he died in 1947, 11 years before NASA was founded. How did he have any part to do in founding NASA, being dead for 11 years? I have no idea how Dave thinks that's possible. Clearly, Dave didn't check up on this, or maybe he did and he's just happy to lie about it. Either way, not a good look. And then Jack Parsons. Now, Jack Parsons was friends with Aleister Crowley and had done some stuff with L. Ron Hubbard. So he certainly is a bit of a shady character. And he did work for the Jet Propulsion Lab, which did get eventually rolled into NASA. But he was fired from the Jet Propulsion Lab in 1944. Quite a few years before NASA was founded. And why was he fired from the Jet Propulsion Lab? Because of his occult beliefs. Because of the very things that Dave is trying to suggest are bad things about NASA, he was fired for those reasons. So quite the opposite. JPL, not NASA, but JPL, got rid of Jack Parsons because of those positions. And then, of course, Jack Parsons died in 1952 in an explosion 6 years before NASA was founded. So once again, how could a dead person found NASA? He can't. Dave Weiss is either really, really ignorant and doesn't do even the smallest amount of effort into researching, or he's lying. Neither is a good look.
Next, he moves on to how the Falcon 9 rockets can land on drone ships.
You live in Florida.
Okay.
This is
Yes.
they launch all these rockets, and the first stage comes back and lands on a raft 800 miles off the coast of Florida. No one's on it.
Right.
It's a drone ship. It's so dumb. They're all like that. And by the way, it goes up. There's 300-mile-an-hour crosswinds and everything, but somehow it lands on this ship. It just falls back to Earth and lands perfectly on that ship. And nine out of 10 times, the camera cuts out just before it lands, and then it shows it landed. And
Right.
how often are the seas calm 800 miles off of Florida?
A completely moot argument for the fact that anybody can go and watch a Falcon 9 launch in person, and quite often the boosters will actually return to the launch site. People like, I think it was Red's Rhetoric, filmed and tracked a Falcon 9 from launch right the way up through separation and all the way back down to landing again. So crosswinds clearly aren't a problem, and they don't affect a narrow cylinder that much anyway. And even in rough seas, a drone ship can hold a GPS position pretty accurately. But I love the fact that Dave thinks guided rockets are such an insane idea. Even though for multiple decades now, we've had militaries with ordinances like bombs and rockets that can guide themselves perfectly onto even moving targets. They've got air-to-air missiles that can track down jets that are dodging around at 400 miles an hour. Then, speaking of planes and speed, he decides to compare the space shuttle to a 747.
So this is a front of a 747. Not quite as aerodynamic, but the windows are, you got a little edge here.
Yeah.
Right? But not bad.
Like a
right?
car.
This
Like a
is the
car.
space shuttle. It's got these inset windows, right? There's no car that's less aerodynamic than this. Okay? Look at this thing. And this thing goes, right? It's got this little PVC pipe here. It's got all these square brackets and stuff. This thing goes 10 times faster than the SR-71, right? With this blunt nose.
This again is a very ill-conceived argument. Arguably one of the fastest series of race cars on the planet is Formula One. Those are nowhere near streamlined, and yet they can still reach north of 200 miles an hour. The main reason for 747s being streamlined is efficiency. They spend their entire flight battling against noticeable aerodynamic drag. Space shuttle flights would sometimes last more than 2 weeks, and yet they would spend a matter of minutes dealing with any atmospheric drag that would be noticeable by some recessed windows. Now, Dave also references that the space shuttle travels 10 times faster than an SR-71, so let's just correct that and put it into some context. The space shuttle would reach a speed of 17,000 miles an hour to get into orbit. The SR-71, however, would reach 2,200 miles an hour at an altitude of 85,000 feet. So the shuttle would get to about 7.5 times faster than the SR-71. The SR-71's engines produced a combined 65,000 pounds of thrust in order to move a 170,000 pound plane into the air. At launch, the shuttle weighed 4.4 million pounds, but it produced 5.3 million pounds of thrust. So 25 times heavier, but with 81 times the thrust of an SR-71. More than enough to overcome any extra drag from some recessed windows. And actually, if you look into the stats of rocket launches, you will see that most of the speed doesn't occur until they reach altitudes far beyond that of where the SR-71 flew. The SR-71 flew at 85,000 feet, which is 25 kilometers or 16 miles high. It couldn't really achieve its top speed until it got up to those sorts of altitudes. The Space Shuttle's solid rocket boosters would separate from the main tank at 150,000 feet, At that point, the shuttle was traveling about 3,000 miles an hour. So almost double the altitude of the SR-71, and yet not going that much faster than it. It was then that the orbiter's 3 main engines would carry on taking it up to 17,000 miles an hour because it was well outside of any atmospheric drag. The Starship launch, which took place a few days ago, that Dave vigorously tweeted about being all CGI, even though lots of the general public went in person and witnessed it, its booster stage carried that up to 65 kilometers or 213,000 feet. At the point of separation, it was traveling at 5,256 kilometers an hour or 3,265 miles per hour. The Starship itself then carried on to a coasting speed of over 26,000 kilometers an hour or 16,000 miles per hour. Again, because up there is no aerodynamic drag. And then Dave quickly throws out some outlandish claims that the shuttle looks like a balloon before he diverts the subject again to the ISS.
Now, I'm going to say something. Does this look like a balloon? Does that look like a blow-up balloon? I'm going to show you something. Here's the space station in the water, and now we're in space.
Right.
Okay.
I've seen those with the green screens.
Right. And you know that they do
floating
yeah.
and being on the strings.
They do all their testing in a pool that has a mock-up of the space station called the National Buoyancy Lab.
Funnily enough, I've already done a video on this particular claim as well. Yes, NASA use a giant pool to train in because it gives their astronauts a similar weightless experience that they'll find in space. But there are just so many problems with the idea of spacewalk footage being filmed underwater with green screens, and you only have to look at underwater footage to see them. In all of the videos of astronauts training underwater, they're exhaling bubbles, which all immediately go in one direction, straight to the surface. During spacewalks, however, no such exhales are seen. You occasionally get blobs of liquid that float off, but those will go in all different directions, completely the opposite of how they would behave if they were underwater. And when underwater, shadows become very soft because the water diffuses the light, and you get scatterings of light caused by the surface of the water moving. Again, the complete opposite of what is seen during spacewalks. Now, let's bring things back to Earth. Quite literally, with how things are brought back to Earth. Obviously, Globe says gravity, flat earthers say, well, many different things, but Dave says it's due to electrostatics, which Toon is going to debunk for us.
You know, on flat Earth, down is down, right? On globe Earth, down is every direction towards the center while you're spinning, while you're orbiting, while you're flying through an infinite space vacuum. So that's a little weird. But there's a thing called electrostatics. This is not a theory. Electrostatics is everything from the air you breathe, the food you eat, your body, yourself, rocks, everything. Everything has an electrostatic charge.
Dave would like you to think that electrostatics is not a theory, but here is my electromagnetism book from when I studied it at university. The Foundations of Electromagnetic Theory and electrostatics is part of the electromagnetic theory. So definitely electrostatics is a theory. But I don't think theory means what Dave thinks it means. It does not mean a guess or a hypothesis. In science, a theory is something that's well established through many, many empirical evidences and can make predictions about things. So the computer that you're using, the computer that Dave was using, uses the theories of electromagnetism.
The Earth has a negative charge to it, measurable, testable, repeatable, provable, negative charge to it. And the sky is a positive charge. So anything above the Earth, this, hey, by the way, Jim, this is the most technical we're going to get through the whole thing, but it's really easy. Okay. It's really easy. Okay. So I'm going to keep it easy. So we can test that. So we can.
Now, Dave interrupted himself before he actually got to explain his incredibly wrong explanation for why things go down. So let me see if I can paraphrase what he would have said, because I've heard him in other interviews. He thinks that because there is a positive electrostatic charge at high elevation and that the ground has a negative electrostatic charge, that everything will get accelerated down. But that's not how electrostatics work. Electrostatics are very simple. Positive and positive repel, negative and negative repel, and positive and negative attract. So in an electromagnetic field, or an electrostatic field, as Dave is saying the Earth is, it is, but it's very, very slight. Super easy to negate. But anyway, if the upper part of the air, the atmosphere, has a positive charge, then anything at all with even the slightest little minorest negative charge would go up. Every single thing. So this would make build sites very easy. You wouldn't need a crane anymore. You would instead bring a cat to your build site. And when you needed a pallet to be brought from the ground up to the 42nd floor, you'd take the cat and you'd rub the cat on the pallet, because that would give that pallet a negative charge. And then it would float up. Make sure you tie a rope to it so that when it gets to the top, you can pull it in and then ground it by attaching a wire to it briefly, and then it would be grounded again. That's how electrostatics would work. So, but what is Dave about to say?
We can test that. So we can take things, like I got these helium balloons here left over from a party, and there's just a button right here, and it's floating like 2 inches above the ground, and this line, that wire, goes to a Van de Graaff generator, and we're going to introduce a higher positive charge to it. So when we add a positive charge to it, all of a sudden, it's more attracted to the Earth. Am I changing the gravity, or am I changing the electrical charge to it?
Well, Dave is not changing gravity. That's part of the reason why it still goes down. But what he is changing is the electrostatic nature of that button. And because that button is an insulator, when you apply the incredibly high voltage, somewhere between 20 to 40,000 volts from the Van de Graaff generator, that is causing a polarity shift on that button because it's an insulator. If it were a conductor, it wouldn't make any difference at all. But because it's an insulator, you can induce that additional force. So gravity is still pulling down, and now you have an additional force pulling down. None of this would work in a vacuum, of course, because in a vacuum, those balloons would not float. In a vacuum, the balloons will fall to the ground.
Now, Dave also keeps bringing up examples of long-distance observations and saying, according to globe maths, these shouldn't be visible.
They say the Earth is too big to see the curvature, but their math says it's 6 feet of drop at just 3 miles.
Except globe maths does not say that. Dave's maths might say that because Dave keeps using the wrong maths. Dave insists on using formulas like 8 inches per mile squared to work out how much an object should be obstructed.
It drops faster and faster. So it's not 8 inches every mile, because that would just be a sloped Earth. It gets faster and faster. And the formula they use, the trolls will come out and say, oh, well, that's a parabola. Yeah, it's a parabola after like 2,500 miles. It's not right. But nobody can see that far because of the thickness of the atmosphere. But for anything up to 1,000 miles, 100% accurate, 100%. It actually gives the globe a little bit of the benefit of the doubt for the true equation, but 8 inches per mile squared. So 3 miles, 3 times 3 is 9, times 8 inches, 6 feet, 72.
But as I've covered in this video, 8 inches per mile squared calculates the drop from a tangent line, meaning it is only applicable if the observer is up to their eyeballs in the Earth, which none of those observations ever are. So, for example, he brings up the Canigou Mountains at sunset and claims the peaks of the mountains should be almost a mile below the horizon, according to the globe.
Louisiana, France, and we're looking out 175 miles away is Mount Canigou. At that height, using globe math, the top of the mountain should be over a half a mile, nearly a mile below the curve. And guess what? You can't see it. But remember how the sun migrates in between the two tropics? Twice a year, it lines up between the observer and that mountain. And as the sun moves away, gets lower, let me speed it up here, it goes beyond the mountain and it backlights it. So here is the top of the mountain. The top should be over a half a mile below the curve.
Except a basic curve calculator, which completely ignores atmospheric refraction, says that based on the elevation that the location of the camera was, and it being 163 miles from the mountains, mean sea level at that distance would be 10,297 feet below the horizon, But the peak of the mountain is 9,137 feet above sea level, so the peak would be less than 1,200 feet below the horizon, or barely 1/5 of a mile. And that does not take into account any atmosphere. When we use programs like Peak Finder, which do actually account for there being an atmosphere on a globe, you instead find the globe prediction very accurately matches the observation. Yes, we can see the peaks of mountains, but here is a photo of the Canigou Mountains. But if we line up the peaks with the sunset footage, I can't help but wonder where the rest of the mountain has gone. Although, even funnier is the next example he brings up, which is a photo taken from the top of Mount Snowdon in Wales, and the claims are that we can see the French Alps in the distance over 700 miles away.
One last thing on distances. Here is from a mountain, and it's hard to see, but all these mountains are identified back here over 700 miles away. 700 miles away, there's 50 miles of missing curvature. The tops of those mountains should be over 50 miles below the curve. And these mountains over here, which are unidentified, are even farther, right? 50 miles of curvature is missing.
Even though the official world record for line-of-sight photography is only about 275 miles, taken with a high-powered zoom camera, whereas this photo was shot with an iPhone, but Dave makes quite the bold claim that nobody has dared try to tackle this photo.
Why are all these mountains visible? You know what mainstream science says about this one? They won't even comment on it. They can't. They just pretend it doesn't exist.
Dave, come on now. Trust the science.
Which is funny, because the claims about this photo were originally made more than a year ago by, I believe it was Taboo Conspiracy, and it did not take long for people to work out that those are not the French Alps, they are clouds. Andrew Johnson did a pretty comprehensive breakdown of it, which I'll link below, although his is a pretty small channel, so maybe Dave didn't see that. But Simon Dan did a video debunking this image 7 months ago, and his is one of the biggest flat earth debunking channels around. In summary, when you actually map out where the peaks should be in relation to each other, they don't align with the photo. And there are many other peaks in the Alps which are actually taller than some of the ones claimed in this photo that do not appear. But I'll add a bit more to it anyway, just to drive the point home, by highlighting their apparent sizes are all wrong. Now, I'm pretty well known for butchering pronunciations, so I am not even going to attempt these. But I'm going to compare 3 of the claimed peaks, which I'm just going to label as 1, 2, and 3. All 3 of these peaks are within a 3-mile variation in distance away, between 683 and 686 miles. That is less than half of 1%. So if all 3 peaks were the same height above sea level, then all 3 peaks would appear to be the same size in the photo. But if I draw a straight line across them, we can see that peaks 1 and 3 are about the same height, and peak 2 is noticeably smaller. However, peak 1 is 3,258 meters high, peak 2 is 2,752 meters high, and peak 3 is only 2,351 meters high. So 1 should be the highest, 2 should be less than it, and 3 should be the lowest. But they don't fit, because they're clouds, not mountains. I mean, a clue should be that, according to the Flat Earth claim here, there then isn't a single cloud in the 700 miles between Snowdon and the south of France. That's without even wondering where London, the English Channel, or Paris have got to in the photo. But he then tries bringing up another one of Taboo's claims, although he manages to completely butcher it by mixing up 2 different topics.
Trust the science.
Here's a new one. This is from a Taboo Conspiracy. Awesome channel. Everyone's the Knickerbein line of sight system. Knickerbein is what they used in the war to bring airplanes. Where are we? To get airplanes to their location in the dark, right? And the first thing is the Allied command said, you can't do it. It's not going to work. The Earth curvature is going to block it. But then some admiral goes, no. Do it anyway, right? And because Earth curve. So we found one of the transmitters, which is 205 feet above the ground. So it's in Ringsted, and the target was in Monte Garmendi, or whatever it is, That was at 3,631 feet. At that distance, right, 515 miles, there should be a hidden height of 129,000 feet. That's almost 25 miles. 25 miles behind a curve. But for some reason that they could see that. So the airplane would fly along, beep, 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 and then it would hit the other signal and it would know to drop the bombs because those two signals are going there. There is no Glober explanation for this.
That wasn't the Knickerbein system. Knickerbein was a radio guidance system used for guiding bombers to targets, but it was used by the Germans in World War II. The stations for them were in Germany, France, and along the North Sea coast. It didn't have stations built in the UK, it was used to target the UK. Now, Taboo did make a video claiming that Knickerbein proved the Earth was flat by saying that the radio frequencies that would be needed for accurate targeting of bombers at those kind of distances would be too high a frequency to bend around any globe curve. However, I've already done a video addressing this by highlighting his misunderstanding of how the system worked. It did not get its accuracy from sending out a single narrow radio beam, which would have needed a very high frequency. It got its accuracy by sending out two much lower frequency signals of about 30 megahertz that were transmitted at a slight angle to each other, and the planes could then fly along the overlap of the two signals. The radio signals in Spain that Dave is mixing Knickerbein with was a completely different video from Taboo about the ACE high radio communications used by NATO during the Cold War. This system used a much higher frequency which would allow the signal to be reflected off the ionosphere and back down to Earth. And the ACE system wasn't used for navigation, it was a radio communication system, so it didn't need an accurate signal like Knickerbein did. Now, I need to group a few of Dave's claims here about how sunset and perspective work so that we can see clearly how his claims contradict themselves. He says the sun stays the same height above Earth and that sunrise and sunset are just the sun moving towards or away from each observer, and that as things move further away, they seem to get closer to the horizon.
Then he moves over, keeping it at the exact same height. It now becomes higher in my sky and lower in your sky. Just because it's farther away. It takes its heat and its light with it. Farther away means lower in the sky.
And he demonstrates this claim by showing a row of streetlights and pointing out how they seem to drop towards the horizon as they get further away.
Here's streetlights. They're all the same height, but they're like the ones that are, half a mile down the road, you can't see them. They merge into the horizon, right? And the sun does the same thing. It just goes down and merges into the horizon.
Then he brings up the classic flat Earth claim that you can just zoom any object back into view, arguing that they don't go beyond the curve, they just become too small to see because angular sizes of objects decrease with distance. So if you double the distance to an object, you halve its angular size. And we can see that in Dave's meme about the streetlights, the lights closest to the camera look big and they get smaller the further down the line you go. But his own time-lapse photo of the sun shows the sun stays the same size. That meme also contradicts his later claims, because he diverts off at this point to cover the long-range photos in Knickerbein that we've just been over. Then he hand-wave dismisses a question that Jim had before he comes back to sunsets.
The thing that's interesting to me is the globe, okay?
Yeah.
And if we're on this curvature, and this is, okay, so if the building is straight up, and as it's curving, and you're like, oh, I can see the top of the building. You shouldn't be able to see the top of the building. You should be able to see it's on an angle by then. Like,
their argument for that is that it
doesn't make any sense.
The drop versus the angle, it's more of a drop than an angle, and you wouldn't notice. It's a ridiculous argument. What's going on here?
Incidentally, with regards to Jim's question about buildings leaning, I get asked this all the time. If the ground's curved, why don't we see buildings leaning away from us? Well, given the size of the globe, its rate of curvature is 1 degree per 69 miles. So you move 69 miles away from an object, it will be angled away from you by 1 degree. The well-known photo of Chicago city skyline that flat earthers love bringing up was taken at a distance of about 52 miles away, so the buildings in that photo would be leaning less than 1 degree, and they'd be leaning directly away from you, which is much harder to spot than leaning side to side. The Tower of Pisa, for example, leans almost 4 degrees. That is very noticeable from side on, but if you look at the tower from a perspective where it's leaning away from you, you can't really tell. Anyway, Dave wants off that topic and back onto sunsets by showing a clip that looks like the sun is setting, but then as the camera zooms in, you see it's actually not.
Again, it's a ridiculous argument. What's going on here? What's going on here? This is in the evening. I'll give you a hint. It's in the evening, so the sun is doing what?
Sunset.
It's setting. It looks like it's going behind the curve, but this is how our eyes see, right? But when we zoom in on this, so now our consumer optics have outgrown their lives, and when we zoom in, here comes the zoom, ready? We zoom in, we realize it's not really setting. It's going away. We just can't see this space in between here. It goes away. This area becomes opaque, and the sun just goes beyond it like this.
Which is a backwards argument for the fact that the sun doesn't get any bigger when the camera zooms in. He's claiming that it's just, without zooming in, the space between the sun and the horizon is too small for us to see. But that gap is the same size as the sun. So if the gap was too small to see when zoomed out, then the sun would be too small to see as well. What's actually happening here is a trait of the consumer level optics that Dave references. Consumer cameras with long zoom range lenses have variable apertures. Their aperture size decreases as you zoom in, and a smaller aperture means less light. So as the camera zooms in, the amount of light getting to the sensor reduces, which then reduces the amount of glare coming off the sun. Especially since there are also clouds near the sun in the frame, so you'll have light glaring off those as well. It's pretty evident that it's just exposure by the fact that the ocean also gets darker when the camera zooms in as well. If you use a low enough exposure setting or some kind of ND filter that cuts out all the glare from the sun, you can actually get a clear view of just the sun itself. Just like his meme photo showing the sun sides not changing. I've even tested that myself. A few months back, I went to Morocco, and I tested it there because it's much closer to the equator. I took 2 photos of the sun with a strong ND filter on. One was around noon, one at sunset, and the sun stayed the same width. But Dave carries on with the claim that sunset is just the sun moving away from the observer, but again, he debunks himself. He brings up a perspective grid showing your eye level, then overlays some mountains and says that the sun just moves so far away that it drops behind the mountains.
Above his eyes.
Yes.
Okay, and here's the sun up here, and the sun's just going to go away, just like it did with the building. Now, it just went beyond the mountain.
That's great, Dave, but what about the horizon rather than mountains? Flat earthers love to claim the horizon rises to eye level, which, if that were true, the horizon would always be in the middle of the perspective grid. Everything may well move towards the center of that grid as they get further away, but at no distance would any part of any object ever cross the center line. And the sun and moon, according to Dave, are always higher above the ground than we are, which means no photos or videos should ever exist of a zoomed-in view of the sun or moon out over the ocean, half cut off by the horizon. And yet they do. But Dave tries to explain this with the old trick of slide a coin along a table and see how it magically vanishes bottom first. Unfortunately for Dave, he completely exposes flat Earth at this point.
So right here, here's the sun going away. I just got a coin on a table here, and the camera is slightly below the table, and it looks like the coin is setting. And at great distances, you can't tell that something is above you. That it's higher than that.
Because this sort of demonstration is nothing new. Many flat earthers have claimed similar, and that you can slide a coin out of view and then zoom the camera in and the coin magically reappears. So I made a video exposing this a few months ago, showing that the reason that the objects come back into view when you zoom the lens in is because the lens optics magnify the aperture opening size, or the apparent size of it, so that the top of the lens opening then appears up above the edge of the table. But that if the camera is level with or above the table's horizontal, the objects never vanish from view. The only way that you can get objects to disappear in this manner is if you set the camera up slightly below the edge of the table. And Dave only goes and bloody admits it.
And the camera is slightly below the table, and it looks like the coin is setting.
Dave has just destroyed his own flat Earth right there. He admits the camera has to be below the edge of the table, and the coin only starts disappearing from view when a physical surface gets in the way. That's his demonstration for why the sun sets. His own demonstration proves the horizon has to physically obstruct our view of the sun. Dave Weiss proves the globe with that one small admission of bottom-up obstruction, needing the camera to be below the table's horizontal. You cannot place your observation point below the horizontal of a flat Earth. You are either at sea level or above it, unless you fall in a hole. The horizon can only physically obstruct the sun on a globe, which ties us quite nicely to Dave's little challenge.
I'm going to sweeten the pot. I'm going to sweeten the pot. Well, I have a standing offer out there, 3 Bitcoins for 1 globe proof. Everyone's motivated by money a little bit. 3 Bitcoins for 1 globe proof. And absolutely, don't try to disprove flat Earth. Prove the globe. I have to warn you, if you take my offer, you will be a flat earther.
That's right, 3 full Bitcoins if you can offer just 1 proof that the Earth is a globe. Well, he himself just inadvertently confirmed that by the fact that the sun wouldn't disappear below the horizon unless the observer is below the horizon's local horizontal. Not possible on a flat Earth, only possible on a globe. There's 1 proof. Plus his own friend finder app using the Haversine formula to work out how far other app users are. The Haversine formula measures distances across the surface of a sphere. So either the friend finder app is wrong and the distances are all inaccurate, or it's right and the surface of the Earth is curved. So which is it, Dave? I mean, I would argue that I should then be entitled to the 3 Bitcoins, but Toon, you've already completed this challenge before, haven't you?
Flat Earthers lie so much about the challenges that they do that I've actually incorporated the fact that every Flat Earth challenge is fake into my laws of FLIRF. There are 4 laws of FLIRF. Number 2 is that all Flat Earth challenges are fake. And it's easy to tell if a challenge is fake or not. There are 4 simple criteria. You need to be legitimate, you need to have a specific rule, have specific rules. Here is the one place that the challenge rules exist. So if somebody just says something and it's different every time they say it, which version of what you said is the correct one? It's unknown. And of course, if it's written down, you can't change them later. They can't move those goalposts. Number 2, those written descriptions need to say what the clear, objectively measurable acceptance criteria is. If it's just down to somebody's feelings or opinion, well, that's not a real challenge. Then a third party, an outsider, can't look at that and say, wait, this is how you should have decided. So if this nebulous criteria, the prove to me type criteria, well, that's not a challenge at all because we know what they're always going to say. So it needs to be something measurable. Number 3, you need to make sure that you put the money in escrow, because if he doesn't have the money in escrow, who knows if he even has it? And if he does have it, if it's not in escrow, it doesn't mean that he's going to pay it out, right? One thing that we do know about flat earthers is they have 0 integrity. And number 4, you really need to have some independent arbitration options of some sort. So the challenge issuer can always just say, well, I just decided not to, or I just decided this way. So if it's in escrow and some third party can say, nope, we've decided this is the outcome, then that makes it legitimate. So I have had challenges in the past that satisfied those criteria. No flat earthers could do it, specifically for celestial navigation. and for predicting the magnitude of the downward acceleration, you know, what we call gravity. Flat earthers couldn't touch it. They didn't do anything. They had a couple people tried, but they used the globe. So thanks for admitting that the Earth is a globe. Anyway, yeah, Dave's challenge is fake. And of course, the reason we really know that the challenge is fake is because multiple people have submitted answers to it, and Dave just ignores them.
And I'll wrap this up by just addressing one last comment that Dave made.
Look, here's the thing. Nobody leaves flat Earth. It sounds like a cult. It's not a cult. Nobody leaves because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't unsee it at all.
Apart from Seek Truth, Speak Truth, Ranty Flat Earth, Rachy 50s, all being quite notable, well-known flat earthers who are now ex-flat earthers. And I must say, it's remarkable how quickly they were ostracized by flat earthers when they then changed their mind. Fight the Flat Earth has done quite a few interviews with now ex-flat earthers, and even Will Duffy of The Final Experiment recently interviewed Amorel, a Canadian who recently left Flat Earth after several years and even being a Patreon member of Eric Dubé, because he'd watched some of my videos that made him question some things. And then Eric, after years of saying there wouldn't be a 24-hour sun in Antarctica, not only rejected the offer of an all-expenses-paid trip to go there and see if it happened for himself, but instead shifted his stance to now say there might be a 24-hour sun, but it wouldn't prove anything.
Dave McKeegan's video about the sun on the underneath side of the airplane wings was kind of like the first chink in your armor. Yeah?
For sure. For sure.
And then I believe it was like 2 days later you discovered The Final Experiment.
It was, if I remember correctly, I know it was the same week at least.
Okay.
I got really excited about it. And when I found out that Dubé was on the list, I Patreon messaged him and I said, hey man, you might get a chance to actually go to Antarctica. You're like fourth on this list.
You saw the experiment, you were like, this is exciting. And then you immediately reach out to Dubé. You're expecting he's going to be excited like you. So how did he respond?
He said, I don't share your enthusiasm about this final experiment. He said it's a straw man. And he said, and then he started saying like weird stuff. Like he said, even if there is a 24-hour sun in Antarctica, it might be a second sun, or it might be a sun simulator.
Which Dave Weiss would know all about.
One of the arguments that people give is on a flat Earth, you can't have a 24-hour sun, a midnight sun in Antarctica. And I totally agree. But in December, if the sun sets in Antarctica, it 100% proves that the Earth is not a globe. Unfortunately, if the sun does circle in Antarctica and not set, it just tells us that we don't understand the sky.
And I think that's going to be it for this video, and a big thank you to MC Toon for helping out.
Dave, this has been great. Thanks for having me on. Dearth is an endless supply of nonsense and scams because, well, he has that app. And the funny thing is, of course, inside that app, he uses the globe all over the place. What time does the sun set? Well, he's got to go ask the globe for that. So he's admitting that the Earth is a globe and admitting that the app is a scam. So anyway, Dave, thanks a lot for having me on your show. If people would like to help support my trip to Antarctica, Dave wants you to drop a link to my GoFundMe in your description there. And Dave and I, we're going to get you some pictures of ourselves down there on the ice, watching the flat earthers just be so excited to know and to finally be welcoming of the truth, right? Well, we hope that they can. All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Toon, and everyone, don't forget the link to his GoFundMe is down below. If you could go and support him, that would be fantastic. But all that's left for me to say is thanks so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video and you haven't already done so, then please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video.